Yeah, there we go. That's our cue. I'm just gonna kick us off by saying, first of all, welcome everybody, and thanks for making time for this micro session on how to evolve from a lead generation to a fully managed service platform. My name is Muigai, if I haven't met you, and I'm the ecosystem lead for Jobtech Alliance. But just for some context towards this event as we begin, the way a platform really designs its matching model really shapes everything, right? So it shapes how how well customers are served. It shapes how much providers earn. It also ultimately shapes how sustainable a platform becomes. So in job tech, there's this one dilemma almost every founder has to face. And the dilemma is like, do we stay with lead generation, where we are connecting customers to providers and letting them sort out the rest? Or do we sort of like take the plunge into a fully serviced model, where the platform owns the delivery, that's the pricing, fulfillment, payments, and even quality control, right? So both parts have trade-offs. Lead gen can be faster, with the lower overheads, and platforms like, we've seen like Thumbstack in the US, Kandua, who is one of our members in South Africa, and many of you in the room have built good businesses, through the lead gen format, right? But we've also seen, platforms like the Urban company in India. We've seen Sweep South in South Africa. They've shown really that you can build full serviced models that can drive that higher trust, better margins, and just stickier relationships, right? So that's why we are here today. And why today it's so relevant, because we're going to be hearing about Goodeon, a platform that started off with lead generation. They hit some bit of challenges, and then after like 2 years of testing the market or so, made the bold decision to like shift to a full serviced model. So we're going to be hearing a lot about them, and we're going to unpack not just what happened, but also some of the signals that told them to shift and some of the practical steps that they learned along the way. So I think with that bit of an introduction, I'm going to be introducing Janet, who's my teammate and who is also a senior venture builder who's attached to Goodeon. So she's been with them since day one. She's going to be leading us majorly in part of this session. So Janet, over to you.
Thank you, Muigai, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone around. I'm very excited to do this actually because, as Muigai said, we've been with Goodeon since day one, and really looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say about this, because this is what we've seen, and we're really excited to also hear things from your point of view. So I'm going to take a second to share my slides. I hope you can all see the screen. Perfect. So really, I think I would do it injustice to introduce the platform. So I just wanted to give Alem, the co-founder, just a minute or two to introduce Goodeon.
Thank you, Muigai. Thank you, Janet. Nice to see you guys again. So my name is Alam Abreha, co-founder of Goodeon. We are one of, I would say today, the premium made service provider platforms in Addis. We've been around in business, I think we're coming around 5 years, but most of this 5 years we've been a lead gen platform, and we had our ups and downs in that track, and we made the kind of the pivot to this fully managed service over a year and a couple of months ago, and I guess that's the story we're going to that's going to be shared today. And I hope our journey kind of helps others not to make the same mistakes we made, or really provides additional insight in terms of like the different directions, adaptations, your respective platforms can make to improve and grow your business. I hope it will be a valuable discussion. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me. And yeah.
Thank you, Alem. So, as Migai mentioned earlier, is that Good Day On is part of our portfolio. But just even before I start the story of our story of what we went through with Good Day On, how many of you have ever set up a date with a service provider? It could be a plumber, it could be a cleaning maid, a childcare provider, and they bounce you. Imagine that's what Good Day On was going through day on and day on. And when we first started working with them, they told us, hey, we need to figure out this demand supply mismatch issue, try to see what are we doing wrong and why are we not getting enough gigs. We have a lot of people who have downloaded the app, who are using our services, but they don't keep coming back. And I'll come back to the answer to that question. But let's start off with how was Good Day On doing things before? So customers would call. In Ethiopia, very many people skew towards using a short code, which is a 4-digit number that they'd call and then directly reach the platform and request for a service provider. Then Good Day On would tell them, hey, pay us a connection fee, a very small fee, and we'll look for a suitable provider for you. Once they check in their system and call 2 to 3 service providers, sometimes it could go up to 20, they'd get one who's willing to do the job and share these details with the customer. So the service provider and the customer will then discuss the requirements and negotiate and reach an understanding and get the job done. Post which, Good Day On would then follow up with the customer or the service provider just to confirm that the job was done and close the ticket. Sounds easy, right? Should work. However, after some time, Good Day On realized that they had 2 angry parties. The service providers were not willing to do the work. The customers, on the other hand, were not even willing to pick up their calls, and they were wondering what goes on after they do the matching. What really was happening is that they'd go negotiate, and for one reason or another, the service provider does not like the terms that they've been given. They just go MIA. And this churn was actually really high for the service providers, about 80% at this point. So they had a really big long list of service providers, but most of them had done what we call silent churning. And in the cases where they really need a job, the response rates were very low. The customers were also really dissatisfied because sometimes the service providers would show up, sometimes they'd not show up, or they'd show up and do a bad job. And so they were stuck in this really bad feedback loop of things not going well. And so we sat down and really thought through what really could change this. And the key thing that stood out was we need to add the value that Good Day On is creating for both parties so that they can stop being really angry parties who are surviving on this platform. And that's when we came up with a solution of creating what they call Etalem. So Etalem is a premium fully managed service where Good Day On really went in and made sure that they've created childcare as a service or cleaning as a service to be able to match the expectations of the customers and also raise the quality of the service providers to be able to match the quality expectations of the customer. So they did this by standardizing these domestic help services, and they targeted luxury apartment villas. These are people who would be willing to pay a premium, but really are really in need of these really good quality service providers. They just want this whole affair to be taken out of the table for them. So they did this through taking full control of the end-to-end process. So thinking about vetting, where they even do a full KYC with the police, full ownership of the quality. So by upskilling the service providers, and in some cases, even having to do partnerships for other institutions to reskill these service providers. And that meant even when they were vetting, they were checking what are the expertise levels so that they can know these ones need reskilling, these ones just need a bit of upskilling on soft skills and how we do our work here. What is very, very important is they eliminated algorithmic matching bias. So this sounds complicated, but really what they did is started with a small pool and ensured that as this pool grows, so does the demand. So they ensured that they're really looking at the utilization rates of these service providers. So they're busy, and it makes sense for them to work for Good Day On, because after you've done all this skilling and reskilling, you really don't want to lose them. And apart from that, they also standardized the pricing. So they had a rate card, which they shared with their customers in advance. And this changed even their way of working. So they moved from having a connection fee to having a commission based on the total price. What is very interesting is that this was a test, a very small test at the beginning with only 2 apartment blocks, but they maintained their original side of the business, the lead generation model, concurrently with that. What that allowed them to do is actually have data to be able to see, does this make sense, investment in this? And what are the results? I mean, I think I have to start with the first ones. Their earnings grew by 200% as at Q1. They know how much it has gone to by now as we are discussing this. The customer growth for this specific model has now gone up to 50 plus apartment complexes and villas. And the most exciting thing for me is the match rate went up from 29% to 95%. I mean, this is exemplary performance. And this also translated to the earnings of the service providers, which on average has gone up by 3 times. But for some, you'd find that it's even gone up. Gone up further. But one key insight that I would not fail to mention is that this method of working, where they pre-negotiated the prices in advance on behalf of the service providers, really worked well for the women. Now, in general, there's a lot of paper, a lot of information that have been set out talking about how the ability of women to negotiate is normally constrained by their cultural and socioeconomic factors. Now, think about this as a person who's doing domestic help services. That is even further constrained. But due to just changing this process whereby they don't get them to speak, but they really just reskill them, and they've done, Good Day On has already done the groundwork, the service provider just has to do the work, meant that the earnings for the women grew by 3 times. And that's really good performance, especially given that these kind of services are mostly women. So what's happening now is that they're scaling this to new verticals, one for tutors and another one for maintenance and renovation, just slowly shifting their model to go into fully managed services as they add one business line and one service line at a time. Now, that's a beautiful story, but I wanted to take some time before I give it back to the floor to just really think through, how does this really work practically? If we take a step back from Good Day On, just thinking through, how do we make a switch? One thing that we've learned is that, first of all, you need to experiment, because you can't overhaul your whole entire business in one go. So as you're experimenting, what are you thinking about? The first thing is, if you have multiple verticals, what vertical would work the best as the first experiment? The key thing to consider here is which vertical does not have a lot of changes from customer to customer requests, and which variable does not need a really high degree of specialization. So looking for standardized verticals that you can standardize and sell the service as opposed to selling the service provider. And while you're doing that, you can do it for a really large population. So think of do we segment this or constrain the scope by geography or by customer segment or by any other segment that you think would work for your business? Very, very key that most people forget is defining success. So what KPIs do we really, really need to change? And what will we be looking at to really communicate to us that we are actually making the change? So once you do that controlled experiment, if successfully, hopefully successful, you now need to operationalize the work. And this is where the main work begins. So one key thing is standardization. This is so key because if you have a lot of nitty-gritty kind of special requirements, it means that it quickly becomes very, very expensive. And how do you standardize? You have to scope all your services, see how do we create this as a service. So for instance, like for Good Day On, they looked at their services. The highest demand they are getting is for domestic help. So they began scoping and selling it as cleaning for a 2-bedroom house, cleaning for a mansionette, and just have to look at that, break it down completely to the lowest level and price it and create a process for the different levels. Key thing for this and creating value for the customer so that they get to actually pay more for this fully managed services quality. Once they believe that this service that we are being provided for has a very good high quality, they'll be able to trust it more. So this means starting from the beginning, who's this service provider? Doing a very rigorous KYC, doing a very rigorous skills mapping, and in cases where it's needed, upskill. Here you can either do it yourself or partner with the right partner to be able to help with that. Or even ask them for a requirement. Hey, if you're coming for this kind of job, you have to show us proof that you've done A, B, C, D, F. Then develop a matching algorithm and think about especially scheduling and geography. So for instance, some people would think of an area, but they never think of the transport cost of the service provider getting there. So start thinking of such nitty-gritties so that it's a fair kind of balance on both ends. And this always goes with customer support, both for the customer and for the service provider, just to ensure that both sides are working well. In some cases, the platform collects the payments directly from the customer. So think through what works for your country. Do you need to think of how you would figure out a cash process if it's a cash-heavy country? Or do you need to set up a bank account if it's a country where you can be able to set up a bank account and get paid directly? Most important, you need to continue learning and learning and learning. And this is done through creating the right feedback loops. So auditing your process, auditing the algorithm that you're using to do the matching, collecting feedback and creating feedback collection processes from the customers and of course the service providers, and just keep learning. So that I don't sound as if I'm just about to ask you if you want to download this information, let me show you practically how Good Day On did this. So what I really wanted to really discuss is on developing a fair matching algorithm. So prior to this, Good Day On had a long list on spreadsheets and on Jira, where they'd really go and query this long list using Jira to be able to find the correct service provider. But after they came up with a Talem, first thing they did is actually clean up that list, have a tighter list of service providers with clear geographical locations and any other requirements. Like in Ethiopia, religion could be a key thing, or the type of food that the service provider is cooking is also a key thing. So they'd actually list them up, and then they would match based on this. But then even after that, an interesting story that Alem gave me immediately after the summit where we had the AI conversation, they went in and thought of how can we inbuild AI into this? And they created a Slack bot, which they use to actually query the service provider. So every time they get a request, this Slack bot sort of comes back already with a list of the service providers that they think would be the best pass or match for this kind of job. And life never goes according to the plan. In case that fails, they have another backstop where they have a Telegram group with all these service providers, and they can go in and maybe inform, just type in the job on the Telegram group and just ask who is available for this job, and they can quickly be able to match the job. And this allowed them to become a lot more agile. Another one final thing that I would want to talk about is about the payments. So Goodeon decided to collect full upfront payments directly from the customer. So the customer would pay Goodeon, and then they now are presented with this problem of how do we pay the service providers. So they decided to use bank account and pay them on a monthly basis. But they did not stop at this. They took an extra step where they actually went and created a partnership with one of the local banks to lower the banking fees and the requirements that are required to open these bank accounts. And this allowed the service providers to quickly turn around that opening of the bank account. And Goodeon is then able to easily make these payments through one payment platform, as opposed to having 100 payment platforms, which of course is always harder for the platform. I think I'll finish with this final snapshot. While lead generation is lower in terms of cost and initial setup, it becomes easier to do that initial setup. It makes a lot of sense in the long run to invest in a full service model. And we hope that this, being able to actually talk through it and be able to think through the steps, even using this case study of Goodeon and based on the previous kind of experiences we've had in the past, we hope this will make this easier. Final thought is, how do you know the timing? I think once you start collecting the data, you can be able to see that you either have disgruntled customers or you have high churn rates. If you look at your data, you can be able to tell if your current model is working or not, because sometimes lead generation does actually work, but we found that mostly in Africa, it does not. And I want to stop there briefly in case there are any questions. I see so much activity in the chats. I don't know if anyone wants to raise their hand for a question, comment. The Goodeon team that was part of this, I think, are all part of the call. So in case I left anything out, please feel free to jump in.
Hi, Janet. This is Jean from Kandua. I just had a question about how you practically do your skills evaluation. Like, what is that? What does that look like in real life?
Alem, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks. Actually, that's a really, really good question that we are working on head on. Like at this moment, this is kind of our current priority. So skill evaluation and certifying the skill of the service provider that made is we still today don't have like that solution in place, but we're working towards it. So what I mean by that is even though our premium made service provider exploded over the year, it just took off. One thing we were, as wonderful as the growth was, what's really astonishing is also how much we're failing. The extent of lead failures. Around 65% of our leads, we're still to date not able to meet and kind of provide the service. So there is this, loss of leads that's currently happening, and simply it's because of skill gaps, and because we're charging 3 to 4 times more than the traditional or the market, the maid, whatever other maids are getting paid in Addis, we're charging a lot more. So with that, what's coming to us is customers asking having very specific demands. having the need for a specific skill set. So providing the right provider for this requirement obviously, naturally requires a way of validating the skills of the mates. So now what we have started working on is actually we have started developing our own kind of standard certification for what a cooking maid should be like for our premium service. And as part of that, we're making the screened mates that we think are fit for our Italian service. We're making them go through this rapid um, upskilling and certification. We're getting them, their skills are getting tested practically in a kitchen, and that's where we are. We're still formulating the metrics where to say this lady can be an Italian maid, this cannot be. So to make that, to distinguish that, to make that like really cut off, like this is, the skill set we need in our workforce. We're trying to make that happen. It's still not easy. So far, what we have done is over time with the learning, we've been ramping up, like we've been raising the bar of, the requirement to be an Italian. They have to go through a whole lot of screening processes like the police background check, the personal guarantor, they have to get their bank account, like Janet mentioned, from a specific partner bank. We also look at their experience background. For example, in the past, we used to just rely on, for example, if a lady says, oh, she has worked in a restaurant, then we just need to see some documentation around it. If she says she's been a migrant worker working, in the Middle East, if she's a returnee, then we want to see at least, that stamp on the passport, visa stamp. So we're correlating based on, trying to verify their background based on available documents where it's possible. Otherwise, now what we have recently started is just this making them go through this um, scale upskilling, rapid upskilling courses, which are hands-on in kitchens, and also getting them evaluated for set of skills. Could be hygiene, knife skills, portioning, sizing, all those fundamentals they need to have as cooks when they go to meet the level of quality we're promising to our customers. So that's where we are. I hope that has touched or
Yeah.
like really answered your question.
Yeah, super helpful. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
good
Alan.
question from Damola there as well.
Yes, I was going to actually go into that. So Damola asked a question on who pays for the KYC etc for the good day owner or the artisans. This is so what happens is that in Ethiopia, it's the norm for someone to ask you for something like a police clearance or guarantors, who are people who sign to show that you're a person who's in good standing. So Good Day On just paints this as a picture of these are the requirements for you to join us, and they come with the requirements. Of course, this throws out some people. Are the nannies on permanent basis or contract? No, they are freelancers, but due to this tight leash on the demand versus supply, it means that the service providers are engaged close to 100% of the time. So they actually want to come back because this is it behaves like a permanent kind of job, but they are freelancers. I don't know if there's any other question. If there's none, I have my
Yeah, I do have
question.
one.
Okay. Let's go ahead.
All right, my name is Toby. I'm calling in from Nigeria. I would love to learn more about your client acquisition tactics, especially when you pivoted and tried other verticals. Like, what was that like? Just getting to bringing clients on board to work with some of these artisans.
Alan, do you want to take that? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, the interesting question again. So the way Italian spin-off happened was in a very controlled environment. So when we first started, actually, we did not think that there will be, a lot of customers who would be willing to pay the amount we're asking. So we're not sure. We did not know. So that's why the experiment happened in a very small controlled environment in one specific apartment complex, uh, that has a few blocks. And um, so when we did that, we were, so because the payment was slightly higher, I mean, a lot higher, to be honest, as compared to the market, we thought with this premium service would be kind of targeting expats and foreigners who live in Addis being a very, you know, very, there are a lot of diplomatic organizations, international organizations. So we're trying to, we're, our theory was that we'll be reaching out to that customer base. But within a few weeks, we started getting a call from different locations, different parts of town, and customers were asking us to provide the same level of quality service, for them. And we, at the beginning, Daisy can correct me, but at the beginning, we didn't even try to turn down customers because we didn't know how to handle it. We modeled our pricing for apartments, but then customers living in like this, like single family homes, I don't know what you call it, but this big houses with different, multiple floors, G plus one, two, three, kind of, big houses. So we had no idea. We did not prepare plan for that. So, but I think kind of like the customers kind of dragged us to actually do do the pricing for their residences, things like that. So before we know it, we had a very small, like around 20 to 50 customers that are really happy, excited about the service. I would say maybe our early adopters. So that kind of became our kind of foundation. Then most of the customers came through referrals, like people telling uh, about our service, their satisfaction. And then once we turned around, we turned the curve where once we had fully operationalized processes, and once our made pool work for, the pool started growing, we started actually marketing it. And I would say that from the digital space, mostly, LinkedIn, where most professionals are, work to an extent to get more customers. And also the other strategy that worked well is also really going directly working with the apartments, this high, luxury apartments they call in Addis. For there are this apartments in this, this very affluent part of town, where they have, better quality apartments, better standards. So naturally, the tenants living in those apartments would be inclined to get, be interested in a quality made service. So we approached some apartments, we made them partners. So they made us the go-to provider for maid services. So that also helped us grow our customer base. So this kind of strategies work very well. And the beauty in that is also you'll get more um, flexibility in terms of, for example, if you're working with one apartment where you can get a few customers, that means you can easily source and match for that specific location. Because one of our challenge with matching today is the distance, or like, this maids have to, uh, travel every day to get to their jobs, to get to their gigs. So working with a specific apartment complex where we can have more concentration of service, then that would mean we can easily match the demand. So these are the kind of the tricks that have worked well, but we're still also learning, going at workplaces, trying to form more partnerships, more, like creating partnerships with other businesses. For example, there are property management businesses that really we complement each other through our partnership. So this kind of strategies are working out well so far. Yeah.
Thanks, Alem. And sorry, we feel like we still want to talk about this, but I see our time is up. Just wanted to leave you with a note that we have a big learning study coming up early in September, where we go deeper into these topics and telling the story of Good Day On and seeing how we can simplify the matching process, even as you move to full managed service. So Migai, I know you've been having some challenges, but I don't know if you're there.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.